Hello everybody, welcome to the series of Python Foundation. In this series, we'll go over some of the foundational concepts about Python. So if you're new to Python, if you're a beginner, I think you'll find this series helpful. Today's topic is range, and we're going to look at how the range method works in Python. We'll look at its syntax. We will also look at some of the demo, some of the hands-on code walkthroughs later down during the video. So let's start. So range is, in order to call this method, basically you need to give three different parameters. The main usage of the method is, when you actually need to generate a sequence of numbers. So for example, if you want to generate a sequence of number from 1 to 10, you say my start is 1, I want to enter 10, and my step size is 1. So step size basically tells, how many numbers you need to skip. To give you an example, if we use this method like this, my starting point is 1, my stopping point is 10, and my step size is 2. So what basically this does is it gives you a list of numbers like this. So I'm starting from 1 and I'm skipping a number. So that means, all the odd numbers from 1 to 9. Let's look at another example in which you can use range. So this is another example where you can start from higher and then you can come all the way down. So this is like a descending series. So your step size can also be in minus. So what we'll also do is we'll also do some of the code walkthroughs in this. So let's move on to the code walkthroughs. If you can see my screen now, we will be using the same concepts in the code. So I'll be explaining all the lines one by one, so that you can understand how the method is actually used. So first of all, I can call my method using the range class, and you don't need to import any packages for this because range comes standard with Python. So I call my range class and I pass starting parameter as 1, stopping parameter is 10, and step size is 2. What that does is that gives me a kind of range object, which I'm storing in this range number variable. And then I'm printing each variable in the range object. So let's quickly run this code in Visual Studio Code. You can use any editor, doesn't matter. I'm just using Visual Studio Code here. As you can see, we got this output, which we saw in the previous screen in that orange list. So we got the same output over here. Let's look at the next use case. If you remember, the next use case was where we actually produced a descending list. So I'm calling the same range method. I'm starting from 5, going all the way to 0. And because I want to step down, not step up, so that's why I'm using -1. So similar usage. Let's quickly run this method and see where we go. As you can see, this time we got a descending list rather than ascending one. And basically, the output of this thing is like the output of the range class is an range iterator object, which you can also store in a list. And I'll show you an example of that next. If you look at this example, basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to produce square numbers. We're trying to produce square numbers from 1 to 10. And another thing you'll notice in this example, which is different, is we didn't specify a step size. And the main reason for that is if you don't specify a step size, by default, step size is 1. And if you don't specify a starting point, by default, the starting point is 0. So those starting and step size, the first and the third parameter, they are actually optional. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying range 10, which gives me numbers from 0 to 9. And then what I'm doing is I'm iterating through this object. So this is like a range object, and it can be enumerated. It can be, it's like an iterator. Basically, we can write a for loop on it, which goes through every item in this thing one by one. So what I'm doing here is, if you focus on this aspect of the code, basically I'm saying is I want every number in the range series and I want to store that number in n. So for loop runs for every number from 0 to 9, and one by one the n variable will be storing each of those numbers, like from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 9. And then what I'm saying is, once you pick up a number from the list, then you do an operation on it. So basically we want to do a square operation, which is multiplying the number by itself. So that's what I'm doing here. And then the result of that, I'm storing in a list, in a variable called list square number, and then I'm printing it out. So if I run this code, so what you can see here, we got a list. We got a list of all the square numbers. We started with 0, square is 0, obviously. 1 square is 1, 2 square is 4, and all the way to 9. As I said, it doesn't go to stop. It just stops one number short of the stop. And that's how you can, do an operation on the range by converting a range to a list as well. Let's look at another example where actually I want to produce, rather than producing a sequence of numbers, I want to produce a sequence of letters. So my requirement here is I want to produce letters from A all the way to Z. And the way range function works, the parameters start, stop, and step size, they can only be integers. You cannot give a string parameter or a character parameter to the range function. So what we are doing here is we are converting the character A to its integer form. So there's a function called ordinal, ORD. Basically what it does is it actually gives you the integer form of number A, because range obviously expects integer. So that's how we're converting it to an integer, and then similarly we're converting it Z into an integer, and then we are iterating through them one by one. So all the integer forms will be stored in this range letters object, and then again similarly we are iterating each of the letter one by one through L. And then in order to print the actual letter, we need to do the reverse operation. If you remember, like from here, the character A was converted to an integer form. And now before we print, we want to do a reverse, where we want to produce from integer form back to character form. So that's what this function does, is it actually reverses the operation. And now if you execute this code, you will see we have actually produced a list of all the numbers from A all the way to Y. Again, it doesn't go to Z because it stops just one step short. So these are like the various usages of the range function. Let's have a look at another one where basically we have like a list called fruits, and which can have 3 strings. So we got 3 string fruits stored in the list fruits, and basically I want to enumerate through all of them. So that's also like one of the advanced applications of a range function, where although we didn't use range function specifically here, but we're using the enumerate function, which is an extension of range, or it's very related. So what we're doing here is we got a fruits list. And then what we're doing is we're enumerating through this list one by one. And what we're also doing is, if you remember, in the list, there are 2 aspects. One is a list value and one is a list index. And the index actually gets stored in this index variable. The value of the fruit gets stored in the fruit variable. And if I run this code, you will see we will get both the indexes and the fruits. So that's how, if you got a list and you want to print all the items in the list one by one along with their indexes. So this is where the enumerate function of range is also very, very useful. That's it for this lecture. I hope you found it useful. And if you like more content like this, please subscribe and like the video. Thank you very much. See you.